The Keth had designed the neural disruptor with their usual crystalline precision, each faceted surface calibrated to generate exactly the right frequency of agony. What they hadn't considered, because pain was ecstasy to their silicon-based nervous systems, was that their masterpiece might feel fundamentally different to a creature made of meat and stubbornness. "Increase the amplitude by 0.7%, commanded Research Director Vexai, her translucent body refracting the laboratory's harsh lighting into rainbow fragments across the sterile walls. The subject's cortisol levels suggest insufficient stimulation. The human, strapped to the examination platform, hadn't screamed in 43 minutes. This bothered the Vorthak delegation considerably. "Our projections indicate a 78% probability of vocalization breakdown within the next 12 minutes, announced Prime Calculator Thren. Through the synthetic vocal cords, his hive mind collective had grown specifically for dealing with individualistic species. "Shall we adjust the economic parameters of this investment?" The third observer, a Zelani named Whisper of Distant Thunder, rippled her membrane wings in what passed for a shrug among her people. Her telepathic probes had been sliding off the human's consciousness like rain off plasteel for the better part of 2 hours. The creature's mental barriers remain curious, not structured like our own, more like background static shaped into walls. Vexai rotated her primary viewing facet toward the human. The specimen appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. Bipedal, carbon-based, possessing the standard complement of limbs and sensory organs that evolution seemed to favor on oxygen-rich worlds. Her skin had taken on an interesting shade somewhere between pale and flushed, and moisture beaded along her forehead in patterns the Keth found aesthetically pleasing. "Perhaps we're approaching this incorrectly," Thren suggested, his artificial voice carrying undertones of economic anxiety. "The Terran colonies we've observed show significantly lower pain tolerance thresholds. This specimen may be defective." "Or exceptional," Whisper of Distant Thunder murmured, her telepathic tendrils brushing against the human's mental defenses with increasing frustration. "I sense calculation behind those barriers, as if she's solving equations instead of experiencing trauma." The human's eyes, an unremarkable brown that somehow managed to suggest depths the three researchers found unsettling, tracked their movements with the kind of lazy attention a predator might show when deciding whether prey was worth the energy expenditure. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the casual tone someone might use to comment on the weather. "Are you planning to continue with this amateur hour performance, or should I expect something that might actually require effort?" The question hung in the recycled air like a challenge wrapped in silk. Vexai's crystalline structure chimed in harmonics that translated roughly to bewilderment. The Vortak collective experienced their first moment of genuine uncertainty in approximately 4,000 years of hive mind consensus. Whisper of Distant Thunder's telepathic abilities, honed across centuries of reading minds like open books, encountered something that felt suspiciously like amusement, radiating from their test subject. "You've been monitoring my stress responses," the human continued, as if discussing the daily temperature readings. "Cortisol, adrenaline, neural activity patterns. Very thorough, very predictable." Thren's collective processed this information with the speed of distributed consciousness. "The subject appears to be experiencing some form of psychological break. This could prove valuable for our research parameters." "Could it?" The human tilted her head with the kind of curiosity that made the three researchers suddenly, inexplicably nervous. "Or could it be that you've spent the last several hours providing me with detailed intelligence about your technologies, your physiological responses to stress, and your decision-making protocols under pressure?" The silence that followed, carried the weight of 3 distinct species, realizing simultaneously that their carefully controlled experiment had somehow shifted into uncharted territory. The human smile, when it finally appeared, contained enough sharp edges to make Vexai's crystalline matrix resonate in sympathy. "My turn," she said. The lights in the facility flickered once, as if the station itself had shivered. What happened next would later be classified in 17 different galactic databases, under headings ranging from "Unprecedented Xenobiological Event" to "Why We Don't Poke Unknown Species Anymore." The human began speaking, in the tone university professors reserve for particularly slow students. "Vexai, your crystalline matrix resonates at precisely 847.3 Hz when you experience what you call analytical satisfaction. Every time you adjusted the neural disruptor, that frequency spiked. Fascinating how pain as pleasure species telegraph their emotional responses via harmonic vibration." The Keth research director's translucent form went completely still. Among her people, such perfect silence indicated either deep meditation or existential terror. Thren, or should I say the 40,000 individual consciousness fragments currently masquerading as a single entity. The human's gaze shifted to the Vorthak representative. "Your hive mind efficiency is impressive, but you broadcast decision trees like a networking protocol. I've been watching your collective debate probability matrices for 2 hours. Did you know you have a 12.7-second delay between controversial proposals and consensus formation?" The artificial vocal cords went quiet. Somewhere in the vast network of the Vorthak collective, 40,000 minds experienced something they had no word for: individual panic. Whisper of distance. Thunder folded her membrane wings closer to her body, a defensive posture her species adopted when confronting concepts that threatened their worldview. The telepathic barriers. "How did you generate structured mental static that feels like walls but functions like mirrors?" The human's expression suggested she found the question charmingly naive. "Humans call it compartmentalization. We don't just think in straight lines like most species. We think in spirals, loops, contradictions, and paradoxes simultaneously. Your telepathic probes kept encountering thoughts that shouldn't exist logically, so they assumed they were hitting barriers." She flexed against the restraints. "Not struggling, merely testing. While you were trying to break me psychologically, I was mapping your neurological architectures. The Keth process information through crystalline lattice formations that create predictable resonance patterns. The Vorthak use distributed processing with hierarchical priority systems. The Zelani rely on telepathic consensus building that requires emotional synchronization with their targets." Vexai found her voice, though it emerged as discordant chimes. "This is impossible. Terra was classified as a pre-contact civilization. Your species barely achieved orbital flight." "Barely achieved?" The human laughed, and the sound contained enough genuine amusement to make all 3 researchers step backward involuntarily. "You classified us based on what we wanted you to see. Every species that achieves interstellar capability eventually sends scouts to catalog primitive worlds. We've been watching your scouts for decades." Thren's collective experienced something unprecedented, the desire to ask a question without first calculating the economic implications. "What are you?" "Patient." The human began working, one hand free from its restraint, with movements that suggested extensive practice. "Your species encounter a world full of creatures that wage war for resources, ideology, and entertainment, that torture each other for information, pleasure, and boredom, that survive by adapting to environments specifically designed to kill them, and somehow you concluded we were harmless." The restraint clicked open. Every civilization goes through the same phases: discovery, expansion, contact, integration. You assume everyone follows that pattern because it's logical, efficient, profitable. She freed her other hand with casual efficiency. Humans discovered something different. We learned that the galaxy is full of species who think they understand predation because they've conquered their homeworlds. Whisper of Distant Thunder's telepathic abilities finally penetrated the human's mental defenses, and what she found there made her keen in frequencies that bypassed translation protocols entirely. "You've never encountered a species that conquered itself," the human said, standing up from the examination platform. "Multiple times, for practice." The facility's lights dimmed as something very large began approaching through hyperspace. The human walked to the central console with the unhurried gait of someone who owned the room and was only now bothering to collect the deed. Her fingers danced across interfaces designed for 3 different alien physiologies, with the fluency of native familiarity. "Remarkable engineering," she commented, activating a sequence that made Vexai's crystalline matrix shriek in harmonics of pure horror. The Keth built this neural disruptor to amplify their own pleasure responses when exposed to others' pain. Reversing the polarity should create a feedback loop that turns their bliss circuits into screaming nightmares. Vexai collapsed as her own torture device began feeding her species' equivalent of agony directly into her nervous system. The irony would have been poetic if anyone present had possessed the emotional distance to appreciate it. "The Vorthak Collective operates on shared processing power," the human continued, her voice maintaining the same conversational tone she might use to explain a recipe. "Introduce contradictory data streams into their network, and 40,000 minds trying to achieve consensus will tie themselves into philosophical knots." She activated another sequence. Somewhere in the collective consciousness of the Vorthak, every individual fragment began receiving simultaneous commands to calculate the numerical value of purple, the economic implications of theoretical mathematics, and the profit margins of selling gravity to civilizations that had already invented it. Thren's artificial voice box began emitting sounds that resembled a computer attempting to sing opera while having an existential crisis. "And telepathic species," the human said, turning toward Whisper of Distant Thunder with a smile that contained too many teeth, "are particularly vulnerable to minds that generate chaos instead of order." She didn't touch any controls this time. Instead, she began thinking, deliberately, aggressively, in patterns that violated every principle of rational thought. She imagined the sound of colors, the taste of mathematics, the emotional weight of theoretical physics. She contemplated concepts that existed in logical contradictions: the loneliness of hive minds, the silence of screaming, the warmth of absolute zero. Whisper of Distant Thunder's telepathic abilities, evolved to navigate the orderly thoughts of civilized minds, encountered a consciousness that operated like a hurricane made of pure concept. Her membrane wings began fluttering in seizure-like spasms as her brain tried to process thoughts that shouldn't exist. "The beautiful thing about human neurology," the human explained to her 3 incapacitated captors, "is that we evolved to survive in a reality that actively tried to kill us. Our brains learned to function despite trauma, injury, sleep deprivation, and chemical imbalances that would shut down most galactic species permanently." She walked over to the facility's communication array and began entering coordinates with the same casual precision she'd shown with the torture devices. "We don't just endure impossible situations, we thrive in them. We turn them into advantages." The approaching hyperspace signature resolved into something that made the station's sensors emit warning klaxons in 3 different alien languages. Whatever was coming had enough mass to register as a small moon, and enough energy output to power a star system. "Did you really think," the human asked, watching readouts that showed her rescuers were exactly on schedule, that a species capable of splitting atoms for entertainment, manipulating DNA for convenience, and turning mathematics into weapons would be helpless against glorified lab equipment. She paused at the facility's environmental controls, her finger hovering over settings that would flood the station with atmospheric mixtures toxic to all three alien species, but perfectly breathable for baseline humans. The torture session you just conducted? It wasn't your research project, it was ours. The hyperspace wake hit the station like a tsunami made of folded space-time, and through the viewports the researchers caught their first glimpse of what humanity considered appropriate rescue equipment for a single captured operative. Overkill, the human observed with satisfaction, is underrated. The rescue vessel that materialized from hyperspace wasn't built according to any engineering principles the three researchers recognized. It possessed the organic curves of Zelani biotechnology, the crystalline precision of Keth manufacturing, and the distributed redundancy of Vorfak design philosophy. Seeing their own innovations combined into something that shouldn't exist was almost as disturbing as realizing how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. Impossible, Vexai managed to chime through her crystalline agony. Those technologies are incompatible. The quantum resonance frequencies alone would tear apart any vessel built by species that think in monocultural paradigms, the human finished. She gestured toward the approaching ship with proprietary pride. Humans excel at making incompatible things work together. We've had practice. Three figures materialized in the facility via transportation technology that bypassed every security protocol the station possessed. The newcomers moved with the fluid coordination of a military unit, but their equipment defied categorization. One carried weapons that hummed with Keth harmonic frequencies. Another wore armor that shifted and adapted like Vorthak collective consciousness made solid. The third possessed sensory equipment that clearly utilized Zelani telepathic enhancement principles. "Target secured," announced the leader, a woman whose casual demeanor suggested this was roughly as challenging as grocery shopping. "Package retrieval successful. Local resistance neutralized via their own methodologies." Thren's collective consciousness managed to reassemble enough coherence to ask the question that was destroying what remained of his sanity. "How long have you been watching us?" The human who'd endured their research smiled with the kind of maternal patience reserved for children asking why the sky was blue. "Since your first scout ships entered what you call the local group approximately 67 years ago, every species that achieves interstellar travel follows the same pattern: explore, catalog, evaluate, contact. Very predictable." She walked over to where Whisper of Distant Thunder was still recovering from her encounter with weaponized human consciousness. The Zelani Confederation established first contact protocols in the Rigel system 4 decades ago. The Keth Crystalline Collective began mining operations in the asteroid belt 32 years ago. The Vorthak Economic Syndicate set up trade evaluation stations throughout the Outer Rim 18 years ago. One of the rescue team members began downloading data from the facility's computers, with equipment that interfaced seamlessly with alien technology. Every time you studied us, catalogued us, dismissed us as primitive, you were actually providing us with detailed intelligence about your capabilities, your territories, and your weaknesses. Vexai's matrix resonated with the harmonic equivalent of dawning horror. The classification of Terra as a pre-conquered world was our classification, the human confirmed, submitted through your own intelligence networks by operatives you never detected. We've been members of the Galactic Council for 15 years, we just never bothered to announce ourselves. The downloading process completed with a cheerful chime, that sounded obscenely pleasant given the circumstances. Decades of research, technological specifications, and strategic intelligence flowed into human databases while their former captors watched helplessly. Your governments will receive formal diplomatic contact within the next standard cycle, the rescue team leader announced with bureaucratic efficiency. Earth's embassy ships are already en route to your respective homeworlds. We'll be discussing territorial adjustments, technology sharing agreements, and reparations for unauthorized biological experimentation on human citizens. The human who had endured their torture stood up, brushing invisible dust from her clothes with the air of someone finishing a particularly tedious business meeting. Thank you for your cooperation in this intelligence-gathering operation. Your contributions to human xenobiological research have been invaluable. As the rescue team prepared to depart, she turned back to address her former captors one final time. Oh, and gentlemen, ladies, collective consciousness fragments, the next time you encounter a species that survives by turning every disadvantage into a weapon, you might want to consider that being captured was just another tactical advantage. The transportation beam engaged, leaving behind 3 alien researchers who finally understood the difference between being apex predators and encountering a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of controlled catastrophe. In the sudden silence, Vexai's crystalline structure chimed a single, perfect note that translated roughly to, "We are so very fucked."